Welcome back to part 2 of the interface between sex trafficking, ritual abuse, and mind control programming. I'm Donna Lyon. I am an academic and researcher at the Faculty of Fine Arts and Music, University of Melbourne, Australia. I'm also a survivor of ritual abuse. In part 1, our panellists described how they were trafficked and discussed their upbringing. In part 2, our panellists will now describe how they escaped their abusers, how their abusers attempted to maintain control, signs and symptoms specific to their mind control and ritual abuse experiences, and share their healing journeys. This information can be intense. Please feel free to do what you need to do to take care of yourself. The panel members understand and support you in your self-care. I'd like to welcome back Jean Riseman, Mary Bulger, and Annika Lucas. I'll read out a short bio for each guest prior to them speaking. Jean Riseman is a retired social worker, an active volunteer, ritual abuse, mind control peer activist, and community organiser. Welcome back, Jean, and please unmute and share when you're ready. Thanks.
Okay. For those of you who missed part 1, I'm Jean, a survivor of satanic ritual abuse, mind control experimentation, and child sex trafficking. I was totally amnesic for all of this for half my life. I was born into an intergenerational Scottish English cult, which was on the wane because it was so conservative that the younger people left, either for freedom or for groups that were more up to date and interesting. I believe my father sold me into a small group of men who trained children for live sex shows and taught them how to act in pornographic movies. I also believe he arranged for me to be an experimental subject in a small mind control research study. So my family was the connection between the 3 forms of abuse. How did I get out? I'll explain it in chronological order. The first to end was the mind control research. I was involved for 6 years, from 6 to 12. It was simple. The man doing the research lost his funding. As for the child porn ring, I simply aged out. The group specialized in child pornography and had no use for adults. I have no idea why I wasn't sold to another group, but luckily I wasn't. It was harder to get out of the family cult. I was sent to boarding school and then college, but there were always rituals on school vacations. I learned through flashbacks that I had always hated hurting people and animals. I hated my parents. I hated the snobbery. I hated being tricked and lied to and never having any freedom. I wanted a totally different life. As a teen, I picked fights with my parents and started skipping rituals and hanging out with my friends. I met a man who my family would not approve of. Arranged marriages were the norm in my cult, so they wouldn't have approved of anyone. Got married and only set eyes on my folks when he was around. The last ritual I went to was Beltane in 1958 when I was 21. There were callbacks, dates when I was supposed to give up my new life and return. I had a strong urge, which I did not understand, and I felt I absolutely had to go back, but I didn't. The last major callback was my father's death when I was 38. I was a real mess for a couple of years, but the important thing was that I didn't return to the cult. Now my life was my own, sort of. You're never completely your own when you have a husband and children. But compared to the cult and being trafficked, hallelujah. I went back to school and got an MSW in social work. I also became depressed again. I forgot to say I periodically had deep depressions since I was a teen. And this time started taking antidepressants. It was such a relief not to be suicidal. By that time, I had been in therapy for over 20 years trying to find out what was wrong with me. I had this itchy feeling, there's more, but I could never find out what that more was. My amnesia didn't break until both my parents had died, my husband died unexpectedly, and my children went off to college. Oh, and the dog died too. I had the space to remember. Like many, I started with the easy things, like being molested, and worked up to the hardest things. The hardest thing of all is child pornography, and I'm still struggling with it today. 3 weeks after the cult memories flowed over me like a tsunami, I met another ritual abuse survivor. We bonded immediately. We understood each other, felt accepted, and at ease socially for the first time in our lives. It was funny, we were total opposites. I was a financially comfortable, middle-aged, educated white wasp. She was a 17-year-old mixed-race lesbian who had never been to school until that year. She had run away from home and was living on the streets. A youth agency helped her, and she started building a stable life of freedom. Ever since then, I've done my healing in community with other RAMC survivors. It feels natural. It's where I belong, where I'm meant to be. Oh, RAMC is shorthand for ritual abuse and mind control. I use it quite a bit. I took the skills I learned in the cult, like organizing knowledge and getting people to work together, and I use them for the benefit of the survivor community. It's a great way of giving the thing to those who hurt me so badly. The very first webpage on ritual abuse is mine. I've blogged for 10 years, started both survivor and therapist support groups, written chapters in others' books, given webinars and spoken at conferences, moderated a message board, and organized conferences. Grassroots RAMC Survivors Collective, where people come together to work on educational, cultural, and support projects, is my latest endeavor. Don't get me wrong, it's not all giving. I get far more than I give. I once was a little mouse, a Martian mouse at that, staring wistfully at life. Now I have a voice, wonderful friends, and a joyful reason to get up in the morning. I'd like to share with you some symptoms that I had as a child that might suggest ritual abuse. We have all the common symptoms that other symptoms of child sexual trafficking do, of course, but our behavior also often has a twist, an unusual, even bizarre quality. I had a morbid fixation on death. When my pet hamsters died, I didn't kill them, no, they died naturally. I dissected them after bedtime. I tried to tan their skins with tea bags and rubbed all the bits of flesh from their little bones, which I hid during the day. I collect bones to this day. To me, it is the mark of respect for the animal that died naturally, and a small memorial to all the ones that were sacrificed. As a teen, I thought it would be romantic to die young, and I spent hours at the bathroom mirror, staring into my eyes with a double-edged razor blade held to my throat. Many of us are taught how to kill ourselves and under what circumstances we should suicide. I was tranced out, and unconsciously I knew it was at the time. I was just reviewing the instructions. We often have unusual phobias or fascinations. I gagged when given anything to eat that was red: tomatoes, watermelons, licorice sticks, anything. Everything except raw meat, which I loved. And I liked the taste of blood too. I collected 22 rifle shells, which I used as iced tea glasses and vases in my dollhouse. Later, I boiled the heads of dead rats to get their skulls to hang on the dollhouse walls. I wanted to recreate Georgia O'Keeffe's studio with her sun-bleached cattle skulls. The skulls, however, looked more like they belonged to saber-toothed tigers. And I ripped the teeth off a comb, hid them under the carpet, and made them into magic swords. They were handy if somebody attacked, Cameras. Seeing somebody using or being photographed filled me with fear, shame, and disgust. Reliance on Zoom during the pandemic was difficult, but it helped in working with these feelings. It's still very upsetting for me. I think of symptoms as memories trying to surface. I was and am ambivalent about remembering, of course. I want to skate over the surface of life, having a good time. But it's my life. I want to know who I really am. Remember, don't remember. Remember, don't remember. I want to end by saying that learning that I had been badly abused and then realizing that my parents also had been abused in the same way was huge. I had resented them, rejected them and their values, hated them so much I wanted to kill them at times. But when I understood what had happened to them, when they were just little children, I felt grief and compassion. I understood that they had done the best they could under the circumstances, just like I did. They did not have the advantage of living in a time when others were speaking out about child abuse, ritual abuse, child pornography. The rage melted away, and I felt at peace with myself. Compassion and gratitude inform my life's work, everything I do. I'm grateful for all who have helped me along the way and to all who have fought this evil. I'm especially grateful to all here who are dedicated to stopping human trafficking and helping its victims. I thank you with all my heart.
Thank you, Jean. Our next speaker is Mary Bulger. Mary is an artist, poet, publisher, and survivor activist. Welcome back, Mary, and please unmute and go when you're ready.
Sure. Thank you. This presentation contains artwork I have done over the past 20 years. The first two pieces are graphic illustrations of my childhood abuse. I made them to help me process the intense flashbacks I was having at the time. The rest of the art was done years before my abuse memories surfaced in my body and mind. I've included them to show how my subconscious has been giving me signs and signals of my childhood trauma for years. In part one, I told how I was brought into a large and highly organized sex trafficking network as a small child by my father and what I feel is a criminal faction of the United States government. In this network, I and countless other children were put through brutal mind control programming to make us robotically obedient and compliant. I feel we were then being farmed out to various pedophile, pornography, and ritual abuse groups as child sex slaves. I believe many of the scientists participating in this program were Nazis, brought to the United States after World War II under Project Paperclip. I escaped this murderous network because my mother began to empower herself. My mother first came to the United States as a nun. While living in New York and training to be a teacher, she became increasingly disillusioned with convent life and eventually left. A few years later, she met and married my dad. She was still devoutly Catholic, and deeply believed it was her duty as a wife to obey and support her husband. By the time I was 7, however, my mom's denial about my father's drinking and his increasingly abusive, violent, and bizarre behavior was crumbling. After a priest told her that my father hitting her was perhaps her cross to bear, my mother sought counseling from nun friends of hers she loved and respected. One such friend had become a psychologist, and she urged my mother to leave my father and get her children away from him. My mother started taking money from my dad. He had become wealthy very quickly. According to my mom, my father owned 3 homes by the time he was 35 years old, one of which he paid for in cash. My mother finally left my father for good in December 1974. She brought me, my 2 brothers, and my sister to Ireland, where my father had bought a summer home. I was 10 years old. This was how I escaped the child sex trafficking network. I grew up smart, sensitive, and deeply depressed, with cripplingly low self-esteem, intense social anxiety, and multiple addictions. I would use anything I could to numb the painful emotions and critical thoughts that raged inside me. Art, music, nature, and books kept me alive. In Ireland, I was allowed to freely roam the fields and forests that bordered our house. I would spend hours alone, exploring and playing in the wild's countryside. The harmony, peace, balance, and beauty of nature soothed me and has continued to be a powerful healer in my life ever since. As a teenager and in my 20s, I dove into early punk and club culture. I had returned to New York City to attend university and then quickly dropped out. It was the early 1980s. All my memories of being sexually abused as a child were deeply repressed. I realize now I was subconsciously either powerfully attracted to or repulsed by things that were clues and signs of my childhood trauma. I was drawn to a vibrant art scene that was emerging on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Here, freedom of expression and creativity were valued, celebrated, and encouraged. I felt also deeply attracted to the art, style, and mindset of punk rock. The raw expression of pain and anger in imagery and music, the ideas of questioning authority and the status quo, and thinking for myself were very liberating for me. I was attracted to a very sexualized style of dress and bondage gear. I wore a dog collar on and off for years. I have since remembered being forced to wear a dog collar at times as a sex trafficked child to please my pedophile abusers. I had a secret and disturbing fascination with swastikas and was attracted to skulls, blood, and even hypodermic needles. I started using heroin to numb the intensely negative thoughts and feelings that haunted me. I was looking for answers to my questions and ways to make life better for myself. I found books that helped me. Sunea Roman's Earth Life series and the work of Charles Whitfield, MD, have been rich sources of knowledge and wisdom for me and introduced me to meditations I have used consistently over the past 30 years. I started going to 12-step meetings and I had a child. My daughter awakened a deep love in me and showed me that living with joy was possible. I desperately wanted to be a good mom to her. And give her a happy childhood. I began focusing in earnest on 12-step recovery and healing myself. I overcame a deep fear of medical professionals, to go to doctor visits, and then later the dentist. As years went by, my ability to love myself and others grew stronger, and my creativity started to bloom after being almost completely shut down for many years. The artwork I am showing here and throughout the rest of this presentation, I made years before my ritual abuse and mind control memories surfaced. I'm showing them to illustrate how my subconscious mind was giving me clues to my abuse. Painting, poetry, journaling, and drawing helped me access deeper levels of my heart and mind and bring me great peace, insight, and joy. When sexual and ritual and mind control abuse memories started erupting from my body and mind over 10 years ago, I had many healing tools to navigate them. I also found therapists and other mind control survivors and ritual abuse survivors whose experience, compassion, and ability to hear and understand my trauma have helped me tremendously. And I feel have helped me save my life. I'm still having flashbacks almost every day. And there are days when healing has been very challenging for me. At the same time, my life has never held more freedom, peace, joy, empowerment, courage and fearlessness, and loving connections to myself and others as it does now. Thank you for listening.
Thank you again, Mary. Our final speaker is Anneke Lucas. Anneke is an author, speaker, advocate for child sex trafficking victims, and creator of the unconditional model, a mindfulness modality. Welcome back, Anneke, and please share when you are ready.
Thank you, Donna. Yes, so the question is, how did I get out? And the truth is I got out twice. I shared in part one that I was for a while, almost a year, part of the inner circle, I would say, of the global elite, and went against my powerful owner. And as I went against my owner, I thought, fully believed that I would be killed. And I have to say that I don't fully understand why I wasn't. I was drugged and thrown in a cage. And I was also taken in a dungeon, chained to a wall and reprogrammed to make sure that the celebrity programming, which would have made me feel very comfortable being narcissistically adored all day, would not take off without their controlling it. So I was to feel completely unworthy of that, of any success, of any, any worldly success. And I did. However, I wasn't killed, and I was sent back to the Belgian network, where I was rescued another year later by an insider who made a deal for me with what was the boss then of the Belgian network to get me out. So I was rescued / escaped because I had a near-death experience in the process. So I would say I did die, and I had that experience on the other side, and then I came back. I had been given very specific and very detailed directions by my rescuer as to how I should live. They included making sure that I would never enter into any kind of prostitution, not even sleep with anyone for anything and ever, that I would not become addicted to drugs, that I could actually take drugs if they were given to me, but never do anything to get drugs. I had to marry a certain person. I was given a very detailed profile of the man I should marry. And of course, I had to be completely silent for the rest of my life and never speak about anyone or anything. I was told to forget both my rescuer and everyone. I should forget all the names. And I did not believe that I could ever forget. But I was sent back to my mother because I was only 11 years old. And my mother was now upset that she couldn't traffic me anymore. And I could not have my awareness of what had been done, which she, of course, had been involved in her presence. She had lost her main method of control, which was the network. She says I was not supposed to be taken there anymore. And ultimately, she sexually abused me to get her control back, which meant the narrative that she was a wonderful mother and that I had a good childhood and that nothing was happening, which, by the way, was how I had survived earlier on when I was going to school during the week and had no idea of what was happening to me on weekends. So gradually over the course of about a month, my memories were all repressed and I was back in my mother's story that I had a fine childhood, but unconsciously the directions I had been given were operating. And I left home very early, 15, 16 years old. I found my way. I was very lucky, believing that these directives also, plus grace, really helped me to survive life as a young adult. I had been trained to become part of the elite, to be as an elite slave. And so the result of that was that my trauma did not show at all. I looked sophisticated, and wherever I went, people thought I was from a wealthy family, and I could easily maneuver in those circles. I was told that I looked rich, even after people found out that I wasn't. I did have a deep fascination with murder victims, and I would go to the library and look up books and looking at pictures of murder victims. And I had had a lot of suicide programming also. So every time either a memory started to come, I had a very strong urge to kill myself. Or if I was rejected by a man, I also had a very strong message, an internal message that I should now kill myself. But I had a greater understanding that that would not be a good idea. I was asked as a young adult to be photographed quite a bit, and because that celebrity training was somehow still active. And because of both the reprogramming, which made me undeserving, and because of the child pornography, I was so embarrassed to be in front of to be in front of a camera, that it was quite painful, those shoots. I said yes because I couldn't say no, but the shoot itself was very painful, and I relied heavily on the kindness of the photographer to get us through. I was afraid of near darkness, and especially lit up by candles. And I had an extremely low self-esteem and vacillated from being seen by people as rich and even powerful to descending in their esteem very quickly when my low self-esteem would emerge, and I would let people down, as I thought, not understanding what I was doing at all, or why I even attracted those people's attention in the first place. I started getting flashbacks in the 80s, so I was in my 20s. But again, most of these flashbacks in the beginning were accompanied by strong suicidal messages, so I repressed them again. I started therapy in the 80s, but the first therapist, as well as several others, were not at all open to looking more deeply at my ritual abuse, at the trafficking, and at my mother's insanity. They were open to going to other previous sexual abuse that had happened. They were open to uncovering memories from that sexual abuse, but there was no room for any ritual abuse memories. And then particularly with this, with these therapists, also not how insane my mother was. So it took 10 years before I found the right therapist. Now we're 1997, and she had never heard of ritual abuse. She was simply open and just aware of human darkness. And with her, I was uncovering all the memories of the Belgian network, the very heavy duty memories from when I had been a dispensable child and had been in situations where I was at least made to feel that I could be killed any moment, and other children were killed. And the horror and the gore all came out. I've always liked to write, and it has always helped me tremendously. So the last, in 2004, I started writing my memoir, and now my memoir is out. It is called Quest for Love, I'm going to find the right Quest for Love, Memoir of a Child Sex Slave. And I'm very proud that it is finally available. And a lot of my healing journey is also in my book. So I just want to say I'm very grateful to everyone here as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Annika. Thank you for everyone for sharing your incredible journey, for your ability to reclaim your life, body and minds. It truly shows how resilient and incredible we are, but also the time and energy that goes into recovery and healing. So now we look forward to connecting with the audience in the Q&A section, and thank you again. So welcome back, everyone. And we've got quite a few questions, which is great. I'll start with one of the ones that's been kind of upvoted, which is around how your experiences impact your family relationships. And for those that might be comfortable to share, whether you've got kids and, you know, how has that kind of evolved? Are you super protective of them? Do you feel really guarded with them, etc.?
I can speak to that.
Yeah.
I remember before my memories surfaced, I had an absolute paranoia when my daughter turned 5, very specific, that a group of men, that she was going to hurt her. And I knew it was paranoid, and I knew that it was such a specifically unusual phobia. And so now that my memories are out, I'm very careful not to use my daughter as a therapist because we are close. But I got the message from her early on that she doesn't really want to hear details of this. She knows in general what happened to me. And there's more awareness, I think, in culturally of MK Ultra in general. And so I allow her to come to me and ask questions. I don't push anything on her. But at the same time, if she calls me and says, how you're doing, I'll say, I'm actually had an intense flashback today. So I do let her know, but I respect her boundaries.
Thanks. Jean, do you want to answer a little bit of that?
As soon as I unmute, I have 2 kids and 4 grandkids, and they've all turned out fine. I mean, somehow it was a miracle that without knowing it, I stopped that generational inheritance of abuse. I just think it's a miracle. I always felt anxious that I might hurt them, that I might allow them to be hurt. I don't think I was overly protective. I don't know. But they are independent and have their own lives and have, unfortunately, they live far away from me because of circumstance. But yeah, I mean, also, I had a brother, and when I got my memories, I disclosed to him, and he had all the signs of being a survivor too, and I was pretty damn sure that I had seen him there, and tried to protect him and couldn't. But he came out, just that far, and then said, "Jean, I can't help you. I have no memories." I mean, that's a very strange thing to say. And shut down completely. And I wish I'd been closer to him. He did not want to be close. He pushed people away. He had the same social anxiety I did. So I say it depends. It depends not only on you, but also on the other family member, their personality makeup and beliefs and values. And so that's what I can add to it.
Thanks, Jean. Annika, a question for you. Somebody's acknowledged that satanic ritual abuse is the least discussed in the anti-trafficking realm, and that, many people just scare away from it, even churches, and people are being labelled as psychotic for sharing their truth. I am sure you've experienced this, and I guess it's a question around your thoughts on that, but also I think in particular, how do people who are listening today become advocates for the truths to be listened and paid attention to?
Well, thank you for that question. Yes, certainly. I went public in 2013, and I should say that there have been years that I didn't even know that there were other survivors. Can you believe that? Because I was so isolated because there's so little out there. Now, there actually were survivors that were public, but obviously never mainstream. So I fully expected to be attacked, and waited as long as I did. I was 49 because I felt that I need to be strong enough to withstand the attacks. So because I was prepared, I've always been very surprised at the grace and how positive responses really have been. And I think that all of us here are here to sort of defy that stereotype of the crazy oversharing, survivor, which of course doesn't make anyone necessarily, that doesn't discredit the reality of experience. But I think that our healing and our whatever maybe personalities has brought us to be able to speak about these things in a believable way that makes it just very difficult. I think if anyone called me crazy, they seem crazy, you know what I mean? And I think the same goes for all of us here today. So as far as being an advocate, so thank you so much for that. I think the most important thing is that we are that there is awareness of this subject and that you don't shy away from it. And we all here understand how difficult it is to hear, because we've all knocked on so many doors and found so many doors closed to share our stories. So yes, we know how difficult it is, and yet, and of course, it is also triggering. So most people get triggered hearing, and it opens people's own wounds when we start to share. And especially with the elite abuse, we have a vision of the world, and usually that vision of authority figures in general and the world on the whole is suddenly challenged if these things are, if you accept and allow that this is true. So it is very challenging. So the most important thing I say is to do your own work, to allow yourself to absorb it, and do, work on your own, blind spots that make you susceptible to, want to push this away, and while of course being safe. And the second is to share about it. And I think if you go within, if you do the work on yourself, that already will, when you internalize, you will get some sense of what it is that you need to do. If you start to feel passionate about the subject and you say, this really, we need to spread the word here, that you internalize and just check within in meditation, asking what it is that you can do. And I'm sure that your gifts can then be applied in some way, and you'll find some way to help. You'll find some way to share, to bring this message to others. Thank you for asking that question.
Thank you. Mary or Gina, is there anything that you want to add to that?
What was the question again?
It was really around, I guess, your what kind of advocates do you want? What do you feel like? How do you think people could be advocates?
Well, I agree a lot with what Annika said, especially about people looking at their own fear. Like, why am I reacting so strongly when someone starts talking about satanic ritual abuse? What are my fears? What am I, and being vulnerable enough, instead of attacking the person sharing, to own my fear and look at it. And for me personally, my job is to just speak my truth to those who want to hear it. And this opportunity came here. And I think the more people empower themselves, heal themselves, and then just allow their story to be told when the opportunity arises, that in itself is revolutionary, and that in itself can change things radically. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jean, just unmute because I muted you before. Thanks.
I'm sorry. Okay. I think that there are tons of people here who are advocates in this particular conference, and that's one reason that I'm really happy I'm here. But if you're the advocate for kids who are being trafficked, it's so close to what we are that's going to raise awareness of child abuse, and then child abuse, if that's the basis that people didn't accept when I was a child. They had no idea that kids were being abused. They had no idea that incest existed. It was supposedly once in a million families. And every single person here is doing their part to shatter that myth. And that helps us. So just like you all, if we speak our truth and we live our truth, we're automatically advocates.
Thanks, Jean. Just on that, I guess there is a question which I think you'd be well placed to answer, Jean, which is how do the memories come back if people are programmed not to remember? And so for somebody who is working with clients, how do they know that they're an RAMC survivor if that client can't remember it?
Okay, I think that it's common to have the memories leak. That's what I call it. They leak out. They sort of like little hints. Like my fascination with bones, my fascination boiling rat skulls. That was not normal. So if you see these little things that seem twisted or bizarre, or satanic symbols, like her Nazi symbols that she was drawing years before she had memories. Often it seems like there's some event that triggers the actual emergence of memories. Some people, it's the birth of a child who was of an age when something happened to them. Some people, it's automobile accidents. I don't know, but something triggers it, and the memories come, and for most people, you can't stop them. I was in a flashback for 24/7. The particular way I got my memories was the day before Easter. I was boiling rat skulls for my dollhouse, and I told my therapist, and he got very uncomfortable, shifted around, and he said, Jean, have you ever considered ritual abuse? And it just cracked. It cracked my amnesia. And my blood ran cold, and I said, oh, fuck. And I have been at conferences on it. I had clients who were ritually abused. I was clueless until that moment. And then it was too late to be amnesic. The option was gone.
Oh, yeah, Mary?
One thing I wanted to add is that I deeply believe the human spirit is more powerful than any of their program. Like, their programming is very limited. They think they're great, and they think they've got all these degrees and they're such geniuses, but the bottom line is the human spirit and love is far more powerful. I think it was the love of my daughter that kept me on this planet when things got very dark for me and my memories were coming up and I was terrified. And So I think that's powerful to realize, not to give too much power to the programming. And also, I just want to say that art is incredible, in my opinion, for revealing the subconscious mind, what's being held deeply. And I know people, survivors, who were doing collages and just using images they were attracted to or things that repulsed them. And they said when their memories surfaced and they went back years and looked at some of the collages they did years before their memories surfaced, it was, the whole story was there. They were putting it out in their artwork. So I think it's a powerful tool to help with that.
Thank you. Annika, there's a question I think it would be good for you to answer, which is, knowing how deep the elite influence runs in leadership in many countries, what hope do you hold on to for the future?
Well, I think that we're seeing the changes happening as we speak, right? For me, and I think, I can speak for all of us, the way that the world has changed and is open to this subject alone is incredibly hopeful. I never thought, when I went public just 9 years ago, I never thought I would name anyone, but I've named the politicians in my home country anyway. The world has changed, and people are aware that that there's too great a discrepancy between what the leadership says and what is happening in the world. And I think that this is the key answer to why things are the way they are. And I see the floodgates opening any day. That I feel like this has been a dam, and all these lies, making sure to keep this truth dammed up, and making sure that it never gets through. You have no idea how many survivors are coming out right now. People I've counseled with, one after the other, is releasing a book, we're going public. I mean, it's going to be a floodgate. And I think it's a matter of the general consciousness just being open to this truth and going, once you realize all the pedophilic messaging that we get through, because those people, of course, use all their resources not only to hide this truth, but also to put their own crazy pedophilic ideas through and, brainwash everybody to become like that, to accept their craziness. It's like, there's no way that it can last. That's what I feel, that it's bound to burst open and that, we will be naming everybody, and it will all, everything will change. That means
Thanks.
everything, that means everything. That's a scary thing. Maybe everything will change.
Jean.
My guess is that some of the elite are amnesic the way we were. And that if we speak and they hear it and it clicks inside, that, their amnesia may break. They're just human. They may be more twisted and more powerful and richer than most humans, but they still are human. And if that's the process that works for us, we are putting out the information that's going to allow them to break their own amnesia and join the throng of healing survivors.
Thanks, Jean. There's probably got 3 minutes, and I want to get in 2 more questions. So the one question is, do you still find it hard to believe in yourselves?
No, not anymore. I'm having powerful body memories every day for the past 10 years, where I'm feeling the straps on my wrist and the pain on my head and the dazed. I mean, it is so strong, and it has happened for so long. And then to be in the first year, my memories were coming back. I was terrified, and I spoke to hardly anyone. I spoke to a therapist and one other survivor. Anyway, and so I recorded a lot of memories without any kind of outside influence. And then after that year was over and I had the courage to research, I found so many people with similar stories. So that's my answer to that.
And
Thanks, Mary. I'm sorry, I'm mindful of that because there was a kind of I feel everyone is quite firm about that. So I just want to acknowledge that. I do want to end on one last question, but I also really want to thank everyone that has asked so many wonderful questions. And I'm sorry we didn't get time to read them all out, but I feel that many of them were answered in a lot of your responses so far. But I think the last thing in the last kind of minute is, what would you say has been the most powerful part of your healing journey? Just kind of one thing from each of you. Annika?
ooh, right on the spot with little
Put you on the
time.
spot.
So I think very powerful in my healing journey was when my guilt complex, my lifelong tremendous guilt complex, which was sort of created what you could call a mental disability, was healed when I put one piece of the puzzle, final piece of the puzzle together that had to do with killing. And I knew that I had never wanted that for a second. And once that piece fell in place, and that was in 2013, and that's when I started to share. I felt that my self-esteem was healed and it just changed everything. So thanks.
And just one thing from you, Jean, the
Other,
most important part of your healing journey.
other survivors, healing in community, having community for the first time in my life.
Thank you. And Mary?
I would agree with coming out of isolation, but also for me, the takeaway, the most powerful thing I've learned in the healing is love is more powerful than any of this evil. And that if someone acting from love is more powerful than all their money, all their degrees, all their power. And that includes the power of the human spirit for me as a survivor, along with love. You know.
Thank you, everyone. Over to you, Alison.
Thank you to our panelists and thank you to everybody for coming today.